Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite games, Final Fantasy IV, also known as Final Fantasy II on the original SNES version. I got one of my good buddies here. I just want to take a second to announce the illustrious, the almighty Cecil. Say hello, Cecil.
Hello.
Wow, bro. That's a lot of testosterone in your voice. Goodness gracious. I just almost fainted. Okay, so for those of you guys who haven't picked up on that, Cecil's namesake is actually named after a character in Final Fantasy IV, Cecil, who's the main character. So who else better to have this discussion with me than Cecil himself? We're going to talk about four kind of general areas, and it's going to be more of a discussion type conversation. So feel free to leave some comments below, even while we're talking about what you think, or this might be a good video to leave playing and play on another tab, you know, while you do something else, kind of more like a podcast. So Cecil, this is kind of, I didn't prep you for this, but do you have any kind of particular memories with the game that kind of brought on nostalgia, like when you played it, who you played it with, that type of thing?
Yes. Growing up, I've always played video games since I was a kid. My stepdad introduced me to them when him and my mom met, and one of the first games I can remember sitting down and playing with him was Final Fantasy IV, and Final Fantasy IV was also the first video game I ever beat as well. And just having those memories, it's just made Final Fantasy IV that much better for me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's similar for me. I actually played the game with my older brother, who is actually disabled. So he has an intellectual disability. And, you know, it was one of the first times in my life where it was kind of at the point where he was playing it and I was playing it with him. And I was actually able to kind of help him get through by like giving him clues on what to do, because he had a little bit of trouble getting through the game alone. I think I was maybe about 10 or 11 at the time, and he was like 15 or 16 or so. But it's one of those things that I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for, because it helped me. Well, it didn't help, but it kind of facilitated the bond between me and my older brother, who I still talk to on a regular basis and hang out almost every week with. So very, very, very special. In reference to the game, we're going to talk about gameplay, graphics, the story, and the sound. So that would mean the next thing we're going to kind of trigger on is we want to talk about the gameplay of the game. And before I go any further, I just want to say that we're primarily talking about the original US SNES release. There are a lot of ports. There's a 3D port, but we're not talking about that particularly in this video. So if you're saying, oh, we're wrong about something, just make sure that in the comments you take into account that we are talking about the US SNES version. Okay, so some of the first things that Final Fantasy brought to the table with this game were prevalent in gameplay. A very significant one was, it was the first game with an ATB bar. Cecil, do you want to explain kind of what that is?
The ATB bar, or in the original Final Fantasies, you know, the enemies get a turn, then the Warriors of Light get a turn. With the introduction of the ATB bar, you now have an agility stat that coincides with everything. So the higher your agility stat, the quicker your character gets to go. So everything is more randomized, and so it allows for more strategy in game.
Yeah, it also makes the agility a much more significant stat. I would say in some ways it's the most important stat in the game. So a fast character would be very valuable. So one of the things that I found unique about the game compared to the previous versions is that it actually implemented the use of preset names. Which gave the characters in the story a much more defined arc, where in previous games you chose your name. It is true that in Final Fantasy II, you actually could implement the characters came with pre-made names. However, the difference with Final Fantasy IV is that, one, it was released in the US first, and the other thing is that they're much more influential on the story. Do you have anything to comment on that, Cecil?
Having characters with pre-given names, it solidifies them into that world. Instead of you just randomly selecting a name at the start of the game, with the pre-given names, it just feels like the characters fit in the game itself. It's part of the whole arc of the game.
Yeah, I agree. It's totally like this experience where you really feel the character's story a lot more, and then when you talk with your friends about the game, you can relate to each other because you all had those same characters. Even now on Twitch, one of the channels I follow, for example, is very like Rydia focused. Rydia, some people pronounce, but it's like a very focused Rydia channel with Rydia emotes, and very much those characters stick in the minds of people. Cecil is another example. His name is an homage to Cecil, the main character of Final Fantasy IV. Furthermore, kind of talking about the names and the preset names, it's also important to talk about classes when we're talking about the game. Now, we are going to kind of touch more on this later, but it is a gameplay thing, and picking your classes was a part of Final Fantasy up until Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV is the first one where the ability to customize your character's class took a backseat to the character's story, which I thought was actually great. And for me personally, I'm making a game now and I'm modeling my game after that type of paradigm. I have a little bit more flexibility, but it's basically a base off of Final Fantasy IV. How do you feel about the class system, Cecil?
I'm alright with the fact there isn't really a class system and that every character has a predetermined class. Like I said earlier about the name thing, it just solidifies them in the story because you identify Cecil, as the Dark Knight and the Paladin, and spoilers. And when somebody's talking about Yang, like, oh, the monk, and his kick ability, it takes a lot less stress off the player and lets them really focus on the story and just the story element.
Yeah. I've heard people have different opinions of the story, but we'll get more to that later. Another gameplay mechanic I wanted to mention that was actually very new to the game, and it's very significant, you see it a lot later, is the ability to have a two-person attack. The twins have twin cast. That's a great name. Twin cast. Translators did good with that name. So the twin cast is an ability where the two mage twins have, it's like a dual comment. They have a couple of different abilities. But it was a really cool concept, and we see that pretty much in every RPG since. And I might be mistaken, but to my knowledge, that's the first RPG I've ever seen it used in, where you have multi-character abilities. Chrono Trigger is an example of a game where you really see this kind of shine, and I don't really feel it's developed anymore after that game. But it's still definitely in newer games like Final Fantasy 15 and Octopath Traveler. I think also Final Fantasy 4 was the first one where you could use 5 characters. They were all 4 characters up until that point. So that's a very significant mechanic as well. So even though you have less selection with being able to choose your specific class, you actually can choose from your specific abilities from your different classes. And everybody had 5 abilities, so there was still a sense of selection, but it was more like you would choose your specific abilities that were already part of your class versus choosing what abilities your class gets or what class, and in turn, what abilities you have.
I would like to bring up the glitches and stuff in game, because that spreads across the board of everything. Mm-hmm. Shoddy translations and stuff like that.
Yeah, translations were terrible in the original release.
Yes. As far as gameplay elements, there are some game-breaking bugs. You have the 64 floor bug, which they did attempt to retcon in the Nintendo Power magazine by saying, "Oh, Zeramis killed you. You're too loud." But yeah, there is game-breaking bugs. And you really experienced the first one, because I discovered this one on my own. When you're heading towards Mist, there's a particular frame. If you stop and save and restart your game or turn it off and you come back in, the game thinks you're one sprite over.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so you can skip the entirety of the Mist cutscene and still have Mist there.
Oh, so people probably use that for speedruns. Huh.
Yeah, you can use it in speedruns, because you can just walk over Mist without entering the town and triggering the cutscene where Rydia summons Titan and just wrecks the whole area, and the bomb ring doesn't go off, or the signet ring. Mm-hmm. So you can just step back in and you can raid the hell out of that town. And there's certain weapons in there you're not supposed to get to mid to late game, and all of a sudden your characters are way more powerful and you're strong. You're almost invincible.
Oh wow, I didn't know about that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's radical. I'm gonna do that on my next playthrough. Or you do it on your playthrough and I'll watch.
Oh, I'll try to, but I got really lucky as a kid because I was told to turn the game off. So as a kid, I got angry and just stopped the game in the middle of a step and saved the game there and came back to it like, oh, I broke it.
Oh, so you actually found that by accident. You didn't look that up on Google.
Yeah. I also found the 64 glitch.
That was actually
too as a child.
Yeah, that was before Google, I guess. What's the 64 glitch is the one in the town?
The 64 floor glitch. You can go to any staircase or any anything that reloads the scene, that transitions the scene, and you just go back and forth 64 times, and it'll crash your game.
Wow. And
mainly, if you do it in a specific point, I believe, if you do it when you're in the underworld, in the dwarf castle, there's certain stairs you can take back and forth 64 times, and you'll actually break into the game map itself, like the game map layering.
Wow.
So if you take a specific route, you can just go all the way around and just beat the game.
So what's the benefit of that?
Just speedrun tactics.
Oh, okay.
There's no real benefit of it.
So you would restart. If you break the game, then you can move wherever you want, right?
Yeah, but I have read reviews where doing this glitch on your cart can actually just mess your whole game up permanently. Like, not just the save file, just the whole game ROM.
One thing that was really poor about the original English translation is they called Yang, his class was karate, which is wrong in like at least 4 ways. Because karate, for one, it's not a class. 2, karate is Japanese, and Yang is a Chinese-based character. That's the kind of stuff that would happen in the 90s. That's actually kind of the charm of it as well. I mean, that's not a mistake that people would make these days. And that's just one of many translational issues, I think, that wouldn't really fly by gamers today's standards.
I mean, if you're talking about shoddy translation, you got to announce everybody's favorite mistranslation.
What is that?
Tella and Edward?
I don't know the specific translation. Tell me.
You spoony bard. That was a mistranslation.
Spoony bard? S-P-O-O-N?
Yeah. When after Dempsey and Castle gets bombed by the Red Wings, and Tella rushes in to check on his daughter and everything, he's yelling at Edward the bard, and he calls him a spoony bard.
What was it supposed to be?
Oh, I have no clue, but it's a mistranslation. Spoony wasn't even a word back then, and now it's just everybody's favorite 4 meme.
I don't even remember that. I think when I was a kid, or even the last time I played, I just wouldn't have noticed. I played it about maybe 5 years ago, so it's a little bit of a mystery for me. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and stop it there for now. I'm sure there's probably a link to the next portion of this series on the video, so just go ahead and click that. If you're gonna stop here, make sure to hit subscribe. Make sure to follow me and Cecil on Twitch. Aloha!